When my billionaire husband told me to go home if I was jealous in front of 300 people at his gala, he thought I'd just swallow it like always. But honey, Dr. Helena Sterling was done being small. I left that night, and what I did next? Chilly, it brought his whole world crashing down. Hey family, before I tell you how I took back my power and my peace, do me a favor, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell. Because this story right here, it's about every black woman who's ever been made to feel invisible. Trust me, you're gonna want to stay till the very end for what I did. Now let me tell you how it all went down. The night my marriage ended, I was wearing a royal blue gown that cost more than my first car. Custom made, fitted perfectly, elegant as hell. But standing in that ballroom full of millionaires and politicians, I felt naked. Invisible. Like I always did at Malcolm's events. See, my husband Malcolm Sterling ran one of the most successful pharmaceutical companies on the East Coast. His galas were legendary. Champagne fountains, ice sculptures, 5-course meals that took 3 hours to serve. Everyone who was anyone showed up to kiss his ring and write checks for whatever charity he was pretending to care about that year. I'm Dr. Helena Sterling. Well, I was Helena Sterling that night. Cardiologist. Saved more lives than I can count. Published research that changed treatment protocols in hospitals across the country. But at Malcolm's events, I was just the wife. The pretty accessory in the expensive dress, the woman who smiled and nodded while he worked the room like he built his empire all by himself. That night started like all the others. Malcolm barely looked at me when I came downstairs ready to leave. Just checked his watch and said we were running late, like I was the one who spent 45 minutes on a phone call with his VP. We drove to the venue in silence. His silence, the kind that made it clear he had more important things on his mind than talking to his wife. When we walked in, his hand was on the small of my back, not affectionate, just performative, for the cameras, for the image. I watched him light up the moment we entered that ballroom. This was his element, power, influence, people hanging on his every word. He introduced me to a few people early on. This is my wife, Helena, with that smile that didn't reach his eyes. Then he drifted away, and I became part of the furniture. I made small talk with other wives who had that same look in their eyes, that look that said we all knew our place, and our place was to look good and stay quiet. About an hour in, I saw Malcolm at the bar with his new VP, Cassandra. She was 28, blonde, ambitious, and she touched his arm too much when she laughed. I'm not a jealous woman, understand that. I'm a woman who knows when she's being disrespected. I watched them for a while, watched how he leaned in close to hear her over the music, how his hand lingered on her shoulder, the same shoulder he hadn't touched on me in months. I walked over, calm, composed, tapped him on the shoulder and asked if I could speak to him privately. The look he gave me, Lord, like I was interrupting something important, like I was being dramatic. He excused himself from Cassandra, and we stepped into a corner near the coat check. Away from the crowd, but not far enough that people couldn't see us. I kept my voice low, told him he was being inappropriate, told him I didn't appreciate being brought to these events just to watch him flirt with his employees. I wasn't yelling, wasn't making a scene, just stating facts the way I'd state a patient's diagnosis, clear, clinical, true, and that's when he said it. Malcolm looked at me with those cold eyes and said, "Helena, go home if you're jealous." Not quietly, not discreetly. Loud enough that the couple standing 10 feet away turned to look. Loud enough that the bartender paused mid-pour. Loud enough that I felt the words hit me like a slap. The room didn't go completely silent, but it might as well have. I saw heads turn, saw eyebrows raise, saw other women look away quickly, embarrassed for me. One of the other wives, a woman I'd made small talk with earlier, gave me this look of pure pity. That look destroyed me more than Malcolm's words, because it meant everyone knew, everyone saw, everyone understood that I was the wife who got dismissed at her own husband's event. I stood there for what felt like an hour but was probably 10 seconds. My heart was pounding, my face was hot. Every instinct told me to shrink, to apologize, to smooth it over and pretend it didn't happen. That's what the old Helena would have done. The Helena who'd spent 12 years making herself smaller so Malcolm could feel bigger. But something shifted in that moment. Something broke open. Maybe it was the humiliation. Maybe it was exhaustion from years of being invisible. Maybe it was the Holy Spirit telling me enough is enough. Whatever it was, I felt it clear as day. I was done. I looked Malcolm dead in his eyes, didn't raise my voice, didn't cry. Just said, "All right then," turned on my heel, and walked toward the exit. I heard him call my name once, confused, like he couldn't believe I was actually leaving. I didn't turn around, didn't stop, didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. The valet brought my car around. Yes, we drove separately, that's how disconnected we'd become, and I sat in the driver's seat for a minute, hands shaking on the steering wheel. Then I started the engine and drove home to our mansion in the suburbs. The whole drive, about 30 minutes, I didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't call my mama or my best friend. I just drove in complete silence, and with every mile I felt clearer, stronger, like I was driving away from a version of myself I'd been trying to kill for years. When I got home, I went straight upstairs and started packing. Not frantically, methodically. I pulled my suitcases from the closet and began folding clothes, packing shoes, gathering my jewelry. The good jewelry. The pieces my grandmother left me, not the flashy diamonds Malcolm bought to show off at events. I packed my medical journals, my research files, my favorite books. I was claiming back the pieces of myself I'd let disappear into this marriage. That's when I noticed Malcolm's home office door was cracked open. He always kept it locked when he wasn't home, paranoid about corporate espionage or whatever excuse he used. But in his rush to get to the gala, he must have forgotten. The door was just slightly ajar, and I could see his desk from the hallway. I shouldn't have gone in, I know that. But something pulled me toward that office. Maybe intuition, maybe God, maybe just the part of me that knew, deep down, that there was more to this story than a disrespectful husband at a party. I pushed the door open and walked to his desk. The top drawer, the one he always kept locked, was unlocked. Inside were folders, financial documents, legal papers, things with my name on them that I'd never seen before. I pulled them out and started reading, and with every page, my blood ran colder. Malcolm had been forging my signature, using my medical credentials and my research connections to push through pharmaceutical trials that should never have been approved. There were emails between him and his board members discussing how to expedite drug testing, how to manipulate data, how to use my name and reputation to bypass ethical reviews. My name, Dr. Helena Brooks, my maiden name that I'd kept professionally, was on documents I'd never signed. Approvals I'd never given, research I'd never reviewed, and the money. Oh Lord, the money. My inheritance from my grandmother, the money I'd given Malcolm to start his company 12 years ago, was sitting in offshore accounts under his name only. $2.3 million that was supposed to be our investment in our future. He'd hidden it, claimed it, made it disappear from our joint accounts and reappear in places I couldn't touch. I sat at his desk and read every single page in those folders. Bank statements, email threads, contracts with my forged signature. It took me 2 hours to get through it all, and by the end I wasn't angry. I was calm, crystal clear, because I realized that leaving Malcolm wasn't just about my dignity anymore. It was about protecting myself legally, professionally, and financially from a man who'd been stealing from me in every possible way. I took photos of every document with my phone, every page, every signature, every bank statement. Then I put everything back exactly as I'd found it and closed the drawer. I finished packing my bags, loaded them into my car, and called my best friend Lynette. Lynette answered on the second ring, voice thick with sleep. "Helena? It's 2 a.m. What's wrong?" I told her everything, the gala, the humiliation, the documents, the forgery, the money. She was silent for a long moment, then said, "Girl, I've been waiting for this call for years. Don't move. I'm calling someone. You're meeting her tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Her name is Brenda Washington, and she's about to change your life." I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. I sat in my car in the driveway of that big, empty mansion and watched the sunrise. Around 6 a.m., Malcolm came home. I saw his car pull up, saw him get out looking tired and annoyed. He walked into the house and I heard him calling my name. Then silence. Then more calling, louder this time, confused. He came back outside and saw me sitting in my car, bags packed in the back seat. He walked over and knocked on my window. I rolled it down halfway. He looked genuinely confused, like he couldn't understand why I was actually leaving. "Helena, come inside. Let's talk about this. You're being dramatic." I looked at him and said, "I'll have my attorney contact you," then rolled the window back up and drove away. In my rearview mirror, I saw him standing in the driveway, hands on his hips, watching me leave like he still thought I'd come back by lunchtime. I drove straight to Lynette's house and slept on her couch for 3 hours. At 9 a.m. sharp, we met with Brenda Washington. Brenda was a 62-year-old black woman with salt and pepper locks and the sharpest eyes I'd ever seen. She was a forensic accountant who specialized in high-net-worth divorces and corporate fraud. She took one look at the photos on my phone, spread them across her conference table, and studied them for exactly 11 minutes. Then she looked up at me and said, "Baby, by the time we're done, you're gonna get everything you deserve, and he's gonna wish he'd just kept his mouth shut at that gala." The next 3 months were a blur. Brenda and Lynette built a case that was airtight. Financial fraud, identity theft, forgery, misuse of marital assets. We contacted the medical board and I cooperated fully with their investigation, showing them evidence that my signatures had been forged, that I'd never approved those trials, that I was a victim of Malcolm's schemes, not a participant. They cleared me within 6 weeks and opened an investigation into Malcolm's company. Then the federal regulators got involved. Turns out when you forge a doctor's signature to push through pharmaceutical trials, the FDA takes that very seriously. Malcolm's company stock started dropping. Investors pulled out. His board members started lawyering up to protect themselves. The whole empire he'd built on my name and my money started crumbling, brick by brick. Malcolm tried to call me every day for the first month. I never answered. He sent flowers to Lynette's house. I donated them to a nursing home. He showed up at my hospital. Security escorted him out. He tried to turn our mutual friends against me, telling everyone I'd had a breakdown, that I was being irrational, that I'd abandoned our marriage over nothing. But I'd learned something powerful. The truth doesn't need defending. It just needs time. I posted once on social media. Simple, dignified, true. After 12 years of marriage, I've chosen to choose myself. I'm grateful for your support during this transition. That's it. No details, no drama, no attacks. Within hours, I had hundreds of messages from women sharing their own stories. Women who'd been made small, women who'd been disrespected, women who'd walked away and rebuilt. The support was overwhelming and beautiful. While Malcolm's world fell apart, I started building mine back up. I moved into a gorgeous brownstone in the city that I bought with money from my medical practice. My money, earned by my hands and my mind. I returned to my research full-time, threw myself into my work at the hospital. I started using my maiden name again professionally, Dr. Helena Brooks. It felt like coming home to myself. I founded a nonprofit organization dedicated to ethical pharmaceutical practices and protecting medical professionals from corporate manipulation. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The first donation came from one of Malcolm's former investors who'd pulled out when the investigation started. He wrote me a personal note. "I should have asked more questions. Thank you for having the courage to expose the truth." 6 months after I left that gala, I walked into divorce court with Lynette by my side and Brenda's financial analysis in a 3-inch binder. Malcolm's attorney had clearly told him to expect a standard 50-50 split. Malcolm showed up in an expensive suit, looking confident. He still thought his money and his lawyers could control the narrative. The judge was a black woman named Judge Phyllis Carter. She'd been on the bench for 20 years and had a reputation for not tolerating nonsense. When Lynette presented our evidence, the forged signatures, the hidden assets, the stolen inheritance, the fraud, Judge Carter's expression went from neutral to ice cold. She looked at Malcolm over her reading glasses and said, "Mr. Sterling, I've seen a lot in this courtroom, but using your wife's professional credentials to commit fraud while hiding her own inheritance? That's a new low. I got the brown stone. half of all legitimate business assets, full return of my $2.3 million inheritance, plus interest, plus penalties for the fraud, plus my legal fees paid. Malcolm's attorney tried to argue, but Judge Carter shut him down. Your client is lucky he's in civil court and not criminal court. This settlement is more than fair. It's merciful. Outside the courthouse, Malcolm waited by my car. I said, Malcolm, I don't hate you, but I don't need you either, and that's your real problem. You needed me. You always did. You just never valued me. Then I got in my car and drove away. In my rearview mirror, I saw him standing there, watching me leave for the second time. But this time, I wasn't coming back. A year later, I was invited to keynote a national medical conference. My research on ethical pharmaceutical trials had been published in 3 major journals. My foundation was helping doctors across the country protect themselves from corporate pressure. I was thriving in ways I never had when I was Mrs. Malcolm Sterling. Malcolm was there at that same conference trying to rebuild his reputation with a small consulting firm. We made eye contact across the hotel lobby. He started to walk toward me, then stopped. Maybe he saw something in my face. Maybe he finally understood that the woman he'd dismissed at that gala was gone, and the woman standing here now didn't need his apologies or his excuses. I nodded once, polite, distant, and walked toward the conference hall where my name was on the marquee. Dr. Helena Brooks, keynote speaker. As I walked away, I realized something profound. My revenge wasn't destroying Malcolm. That was just a consequence of his own actions. My real revenge was this: reclaiming myself, rebuilding my life, becoming so completely whole that his opinion of me became irrelevant. See, when people hear this story, they focus on what Malcolm lost: his company, his reputation, his money. And yes, he lost all that, but what I gained was so much more valuable. I gained my voice back, my power back, my joy back. I wake up every morning in my brownstone, make my coffee, and look at my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me is someone I'm proud to be. She's strong. She's free. She's enough, all by herself. That night at the gala, when Malcolm told me to go home if I was jealous, he thought he was putting me in my place. What he actually did was set me free. Because I did go home, but not to him. I went home to myself. And honey, that's where the real treasure was all along. Family, Helena's story reminds us that sometimes walking away is the most powerful move you can make. If this resonated with you, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what part of Helena's journey spoke to your soul. Subscribe if you haven't already, because I've got more stories about Black women taking back their power. And remember, you are never too invested to choose yourself, never too far in to turn around. Your freedom is priceless. I'll see you in the next one. Stay blessed, stay strong, and stay true.